Today, President Trump is expected to attend the dignified transfer of the American service members who were killed in the conflict with Iran. This comes as U.S. forces conducted their 11th night of strikes on the Iranian military sites last night. Senior White House correspondent Jacqui Heinrich joins us now with the latest. Jacqui.
Good morning, Brian. President Trump says it will be a great honor to pay his respects to the American service members at the dignified transfer to Dover Air Force Base. Last night, the Department of War announced another soldier killed in last weekend's enemy attack. Sergeant Angel S. Ramperstad, 28 years old, of Ozone Park, New York, bringing the total number of service members killed in the conflict to 18. Yesterday, speaking alongside Lebanon's president, President Trump said Tehran desperately wants to make a deal, but the U.S. is not interested until Iran is prepared for meaningful negotiations. In the meantime, the Pentagon is giving the president options to hit Iran's Pickaxe Mountain, a possible hiding spot for Iran's nuclear arsenal, according to Israel.
We'll be hitting that area probably pretty soon, and there's not a thing they can do about it. I will tell you, they want to desperately meet. And until they're ready to meet in a meaningful way, we have no interest.
Some experts don't think there's anything inside the U.S. arsenal that can get underneath Pickaxe Mountain. Secretary Hegseth, though, said much of the U.S. capabilities are classified. But if anyone in the world can reach it, it is the U.S. military. Meantime, Secretary Rubio, speaking at ASEAN this morning, defended the full-scale war resuming.
We think that a nuclear-armed Iran is an unacceptable thing. It can't happen. And that's what they were going to do if they hid behind this conventional shield that they were building. And the president just was going to stand by and allow that to happen. Within 2 years, Iran could say, we're breaking out to a nuclear weapon. You can't do anything about it, or we're going to overwhelm you with tens of thousands of drones and missiles, which they were on pace to build. They can't do that now.
Rubio was also asked about reports that the U.S. and and Saudi Arabia, are about to announce a deal that would allow the kingdom to enrich nuclear fuel. U.S. lawmakers in Israel have expressed opposition to such a plan, but Rubio said he did not want to get ahead of the White House on any such announcement, but the U.S. would have to work with Congress and would not reach any deal with any country that would lead to proliferation. Brian.
All right, Jacqui, thanks so much. It looks like that deal is in motion as we understand it. Meanwhile, let's bring in Intel Committee Chair and military veteran Senator Tom Cotton. Senator, from this 11 days, are you heartened that we're taking kinetic action again as opposed to pretending we're making progress with talks and an MOU that wasn't worth the paper it was printed on?
Yeah, Brian, as the president has said, these people were never serious about negotiating. They're revolutionary fanatics. Secretary Hegseth said the same thing yesterday. That's been proven clear. We're right to be retaliating for Iran's strikes against shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, but because these fanatics are not serious about negotiations, I think the time has come to finish our military operations, to hit them much harder, as the president said, not just along the southern coast next to the strait, but to take out as much more of their missile and their drone programs and the manufacturing that backs those up as possible. What Secretary Rubio said is right. This has always been about preventing them from getting a nuclear weapon. We've set back that nuclear program by years, but we can't allow them to continue to have this shield of thousands of drones and missiles, which might protect a future nuclear program after the Trump administration. So the president is right. These fanatics are not serious about negotiating. It's time to finish our military operations, keep the strait open, and to keep the blockade in place.
So you say there's a military way that we could use the Oman side of the strait, and we should, even though there'll always be a little bit of a threat, we have to hit it harder to open that up and get the oil and gas through.
Yeah, that's right, Brian. The Strait of Hormuz was not our objective when this started. Our objective has always been their nuclear weapons program, as well as the conventional missiles and drones they used to shield that program. But the revolutionary fanatics in Tehran wanted to close the strait. Well, we can make it our objective, and we can keep it open through the southern end. Of course, Iran, because of geography, will be able to harass shipping to some degree. But in May and June, even before the Memorandum of Understanding, we were helping to get millions of barrels of oil out every single day, as the president has acknowledged. We can do that in concert with our Arab friends in the Persian Gulf region. We can make sure that we keep the price of gas and diesel down for Arkansans and all Americans, while also severely degrading what's left of Iran's military. I think that's the course of action right now that we need to take.
And you want to pick up the intensity, not level it off. You mean intensify. Is that correct? The number of
Brian,
strikes?
I think that's where we are. I think that's where we are right now. These fanatics have made clear they don't want to negotiate. The talks are a farce that are just designed to string us along. We need to finish our military operational plans, which will deal an even more severe blow to their conventional missile and drone forces.
All right. Meanwhile, Mayor Mamdani came out, and he thinks he's a world leader. He's barely a mayor. He says he admits, finally, what we all knew. He does not have the power to arrest Bibi Netanyahu, even though he thinks that Bibi is a war criminal. Let's listen.
Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal. As I've said, I agree with the ICC that Benjamin Netanyahu should be arrested and tried for his crimes, as I do for anyone else charged by the ICC. It is clear that we do not have the independent legal authority to enforce this warrant. The federal government, however, does, and I call on them to join the ICC and execute this warrant. And I want to be equally clear. Benjamin Netanyahu is not welcome in New York City, nor is any other war criminal at large.
Obviously, the Israel not happy. Netanyahu's office has fired back. What about Senator Tom Cotton?
Well, Brian, as you said, Zoran Mamdani is a mayor, and last time I traveled to New York City, it seems like he should focus more on picking up the trash and fixing the potholes and cracking down on crime than trying to have his own foreign policy. But this really is not a laughing matter, Brian. First off, there's a whole rogues gallery that comes to New York City every September for the United Nations General Assembly. Is Zoran Mamdani threatening to arrest butchers from Iran who have killed tens of thousands of their own people, or genuine war criminals from other countries? No. The one person he cites is the leader of the Jewish state of Israel. Second, he talks about the International Criminal Court. Well, that's a kangaroo court. But ultimately, it's not about Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel. It's about arresting Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio in the future if they ever travel abroad. Third, and most troubling for all Americans, is that this is not just the mayor of New York City. This alliance between Marxists and Islamists is spreading and coming to Washington, D.C. The Democrats have nominated men and women who are going to be elected to the House in deep blue districts in New York City who have said that they want to destroy Western civilization. In New Jersey, a radical who actually testified on behalf of the blind sheik, the mastermind of the first World Trade Tower bombing. And in Denver, a woman who said that 9/11 was inevitable because of U.S. actions. So it's not limited to New York City. This is coming to Washington, D.C. because these radical leftists are taking over the Democratic Party everywhere. They're even nominating people for statewide races in places like Maine, and I suspect very soon in Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota as well. It's a very troubling trend. We have to stop it at the polls this November.
It's nuts. And our premier ally in the world, the one says, to let me know how to help, while NATO sits on the sidelines and doesn't pick up the phone, Israel's poised to help any way possible. And the Democrats, you can't get elected if you're pro-Israel. It is insane what has happened over the last year. Senator Tom Cotton, thanks so much.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.